Potion Masters, chapters 19 and 20. Lying on his bed, Gordy scribbled notes in his potion journal. He had once again hidden the box in his closet, but he wasn't sure why he bothered. Now that both bottles were empty, what was the point of keeping them safe? Downstairs, Gordy's dad and siblings were watching Escape from Skull Island. It was a movie Gordy really wanted to watch, but his dad wasn't budging. No dinner, no television, no freedom. All because his dad suddenly freaked out about Gordy going into the lab, which was something he had done on almost a daily basis. Gordy's cell phone chirped as a text came through. It was from Max. "Are you dead?" Gordy pressed the lead of his pencil with his thumb and tossed it aside. "Might as well be," he responded. "Never seen old Gordon that mad before," Max wrote. "I almost peed my pants." Gordy chuckled as he remembered the look on Max and Adeline's faces when his dad exploded. It wasn't funny at the time, but now it was the only bright spot of the evening. "What are you going to do about the potion?" This text came from another sender, Adeline. Gordy looked over to where the empty bottles lay beneath his carpet. "Not sure. Not much I can do, I guess." "Could you recreate it somehow?" Adeline asked. "Make some of your mom's ingredients to make another potion just like it?" "I don't know how. I never got a chance to figure out what was in it." If only he had been more careful. He should have been prepared for the potion's consistency. Not all liquids simply dripped out of their vials. Some plopped, some slinked, some swirled. Gordy's mom had taught him that years ago. "Maybe you could look up what the potion was in one of your mom's books," Adeline suggested. "She probably has something written about it down in the lab. It's worth a shot." Adeline had a point. There was no need to give up without at least trying to find a solution to the problem. Then again, Gordy had seen most, if not all, of his mom's creations. Plus, the sheer mystery of Aunt Pris's potion made it seem unlikely he would find a source in one of the many manuals in the lab. No, not to mention his dad had grounded him for the rest of his life. If he so much as stepped foot in the lab without permission, Gordy might be given up for adoption. "I'll think of something," Gordy texted back. "He was weird today, don't you think?" Max continued with his thread. "What are you talking about?" Gordy had forgotten all about Max's conversation. "Your dad. He's not acting like himself." "I know," Gordy typed, "but I feel bad. I lied to him." He remembered back to the phone conversation with his father and how he'd kept the truth about Aunt Pris's package. "So, I lie to my dad all the time. It's good for him," Max said. "But it's like your dad's possessed." Gordy blinked. He didn't know anything about being possessed. That type of thing never happened in the potion community. On the other hand, there was a condition elixirists commonly referred to as blotched. It was when someone was unknowingly under the influence of a controlling potion. Gordy thought about his dad's behavior, how he allowed complete strangers into the house without any thought of who they might be. Then there was his sudden eruption of anger, and now his dad was planning on inviting Miss Faustus and Yeltsin back into their home to investigate. He may not have a clue on how to concoct potions, but Gordy's dad did understand the importance of protecting the family's secrets. Gordy mashed the buttons on his cell phone. "Max, you're a genius. This is Adeline, dummy," Adeline responded. "Whatever," Gordy typed. "I'll talk to you both tomorrow." He dropped the phone onto his desk and stared at his door. The sounds of swashbuckling pirates rang out from the downstairs television. Gordy could smell buttered popcorn, but he no longer cared. Could his dad really be blotched? It seemed far-fetched, and yet everything pointed to it being true. There's no doubt Miss Faustus and Yeltsin were a couple of frauds, but how had they done it? From what he had studied, blotching only lasted for short periods of time, an hour at most. Gordy's dad had been acting strangely for almost an entire day. Gordy began pacing the room. Maybe it wasn't a case of blotching. Maybe it was just stress. Besides, in order for a blotching to last so long, there would have to be something constantly close enough to contact his dad's body, like a tainted object, a necklace or a watch or a... Gordy's mouth dropped open as he remembered how Esmeralda Faustus had first introduced herself to his father. It hadn't seemed out of the ordinary at the time, since Gordy hadn't suspected the odd woman and her partner of being enemies to the family. Now, there was no mistaking Esmeralda's strange behavior when she handed Gordy's dad her business card. Chapter 20. The bottom stair creaked under Gordy's foot, and he cringed. Though the creak wasn't very loud, Gordy couldn't risk getting caught. Not after everything that had happened earlier, and with the possibility of his dad being blotched. He paused before moving on to the hardwood floor and peered over his shoulder to listen. No sounds of movement. The movie had ended 2 hours earlier, and the whole house had fallen into a calm silence, making every footstep seem like he was falling through the floor. Crossing the living room, he made sure not to accidentally bump into any pieces of furniture lurking in the shadows along the way. Once in the kitchen, he looked for his dad's wallet. With the exception of an empty popcorn bag spilling out a few kernels, the countertop was clear. Gordy checked the baker's rack, but found nothing. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "Where is it?" If it wasn't in the kitchen, it could only mean the wallet was in his dad's room. How was he supposed to sneak in there without waking him up? Suddenly, Gordy heard a soft thump from downstairs in the lab. Cocking his head, he listened, wondering if he had just imagined it. There it was again. Movement. Holding his breath, Gordy approached the basement door and pressed his ear against the wood. He heard the sound of footsteps, the crunch of glass, and then one of the drawers of the filing cabinet slid shut. Gordy's heartbeat thudded in his chest. They were being robbed. It had to be that crazy Russian. But how had he gotten past the wards? The ones on the doors and windows were incredibly strong, but they were no comparison to the ones protecting the lab. Gordy had to do something. Wake his father, or call the police, maybe. As he backed away from the door, the sound of heavy footsteps landed on the basement stairs. They rose hastily, and before Gordy could turn to run, the door flew open. "What are you doing up?" Gordy's dad was still dressed in his blue jeans and a white collared shirt, but he was barefoot and holding a dustpan. Gordy was so relieved not to see Yeltsin standing before him that he had lost all ability to speak. His dad scowled. "You should be in bed." "I didn't get anything to eat for dinner, and I was starving." That was entirely a lie. Gordy was hungry. Or that wasn't entirely a lie. Gordy was hungry. The scowl softened. "Of course you are. I should have brought you something earlier. There's leftover Chinese food in the fridge, noodles and rice, and I think there may be some orange chicken in one of those boxes. I can heat some up for you in the microwave," his dad offered. "What are you doing down there?" Gordy asked. Mr. Stitzer glanced down at the dustpan and puffed out his cheeks. "We have a problem, son." He turned toward the door, leaning downstairs. The lab was trashed. Bottles lay overturned on the apothecary tables. Broken glass littered the floor, and every filing cabinet drawer had been pulled out and emptied. The papers scattered throughout the room. 2 vials of potions had been dumped. Steam rose from one of them, while the other bubbled. The smell was horrific, but it wasn't coming from the spilled potions. Whoever had snuck into the lab had opened Baudry's covering. The smell alone should have incapacitated the intruder. Shielding his mouth and nose with his sleeve, Gordy doused Baudry with a heavy dose of air freshener before carefully zipping back up his bag. What happened down here? Gordy had never seen the lab in such disarray. "I was hoping you would have the answer," his dad replied. "But first, are we in danger of inhaling any sort of poison or chemical from those?" He pointed to the puddles of multicolored goop. Gordy uncovered his nose and took a deep breath. He didn't think the potions were dangerous, but he knew how to be sure. Inhaling through his nostrils, he caught a whiff of choke cherry pits, millipede antenna, armadillo spleen, and just a hint of rosewood. That was one of his mother's fireless heating potions. She often brought it along on camping trips. Gordy tested the second. He sensed granulated turquoise, bladder pods, yellow trumpet vine, and a hearty portion of Japanese eggplant. Though it was more exotic than the other one, the potion was used for deep-sea diving to give them the freedom of diving and rising out of the ocean with no need of decompressing. It was an expensive potion, though, because bladder pods were difficult to harvest. Gordy's mom was going to be ticked. "We're safe," Gordy said. "Good. Now start explaining yourself." His dad fixed him with a withering stare. "You think I did this?" "Not necessarily. Maybe you're covering for your friends, Max and Adeline." "When would they have wrecked the lab? You saw us earlier when we came home." "When you came home, and it wasn't messed up then." "I didn't go down into the lab at first. It was only a little while I decided to go check it out." "Gordy, this is serious. I've never known you to do something so irresponsible." "It wasn't me." "Who then? Isaac or Jessica?" "They wouldn't know how to work the combination, which means you were careless and left it unlocked. Still your fault." Gordy shook his head. No, I don't think it was them. They know better. It would have been easy to blame this on his younger brother and sister. They were rambunctious and messy, but this was well beyond their area of expertise. His dad swept a pile of powdery substance into the dustpan. Which leaves only you, Gordy. Were you trying to cover this up? Is that why you came downstairs tonight? You thought I was asleep and had the perfect opportunity to sneak in here and clean everything before I was any wiser? I would never do this. Just listen to me, please. I think Yeltsin did this. When he showed up earlier, he was really pushy. He tried to push into the house without permission, but Mom's wards turned him away. Oh, give it a rest, Gordon. You can't always pass blame to someone else. And now there's a huge mess to clean up. This is your fault, and lying about it is only going to make things worse for you. Gordon! His dad never called him Gordon. He used any number of nicknames. Gordy, Gordo, Gordster, Gordalicious, but never Gordon. Gordy's mom called him Gordon whenever she was really upset. But then it was always accompanied by his middle name, Ethan, and Junior at the end. His dad spun around and emptied the dustpan into a trash can. And that's when Gordy saw it, the square shape of his dad's wallet bulging in his back pocket. Then it all made sense. Gordy's dad had been blotched and now was being controlled by Esmeralda and Yeltsin to search for something in the lab. Gordy was willing to bet his potion journal that they were hunting for Priscilla's mysterious potions. That's why the wards didn't work. They weren't designed to prevent a family member from wandering in and out of the lab. Gordy shoved the contents of the filing cabinet back into the drawers and brushed broken glass off the apothecary table into the trash can. Now, there's no excuse for this. No excuse, he growled. Eyes darting around the room, Gordy saw several of his mom's potions still intact on the tables. He could tell what they had contained by their color and consistency. He noticed a bottle of Helio drops, perfect for kite flying, 2 flasks of anti-loitering lotion that his mom used at the end of her neighborhood skin cream parties, and several beakers of Boiler's balm, which worked far better than any bandage known to man. All of those were great concoctions, but none of them solved this predicament. Then Gordy spotted a thin vial of torpor tonic. The contents of that bottle would knock anyone unconscious for a short period of time. Gordy's dad was no longer acting on his own, and he posed a serious threat to the family's safety. Gordy didn't want to knock him out, but it was the only choice he had. You're right, Gordy said with a sigh. I did this. What? His dad whirled around. You did? Yeah, Gordy stared at the floor. I was trying to show off my friends, and I slipped. His dad nodded. And you knocked everything over, and you didn't have time to clean it up. Exactly. I'm worthless. Gordy considered whipping up some tears to help with the convincing, but they weren't necessary. His dad shook his head in disappointment. You may be grounded for a long time. Do you know that? Here, let me help clean up. Gordy stepped over piles of glass and dirt, winding his way over to the table. He straightened a few parchments of potion ingredients and ran his hand down the row of glass containers until finally resting upon the one he needed. Uncorking the vial, Gordy pressed his thumb over the opening. He shook it, agitating the liquid into swirling froth of emerald-colored bubbles. Did he really have to do this? He was already in a world of trouble for taking the blame for the mess, but what if his dad really wasn't blotched? Could Gordy risk using a semi-dangerous potion on one of his parents? He felt his father's hand on his shoulder. You know, son, I don't think I need your help. I want you out of here. In fact, you're not going to stay here until your mother gets back to sort this out. Go pack your things. You'll sleep at Grandma and Grandpa Stitzer's for the rest of the week. It was such a ridiculous punishment, which merely solidified what Gordy believed to be true. I'm sorry, Dad, Gordy whispered. Sorry doesn't cut it, Gordon. His dad answered, not this time. No. Gordy turned around. I'm sorry for this. He removed his thumb, and a thin column of bubbles shot out of the vial and into his dad's face. End of chapter 20.